you had an example where someone was questioning you on the translation of Daniel 9:24, where the English says 70 weeks are determined upon your people in your holy city. And where were they going with that?
So there's a new. This is good. We talking about. There's a new video out there, and I really don't want people to see it, but because it's a date setting video, and it was done by a site that has a couple 100,000 subscribers, and a very well done video actually. But they were looking at Daniel 9:24, and they were making the claim that, and of course this person was the only one that's ever discovered it, right, in the history of all scholarship, and that the idea of 77s being determined for your holy people and your holy, city, Jerusalem, Daniel's 70-week prophecy, that this was a mistranslation into all English translations where it'll say 77s or 70 weeks. And so what they were trying to say was that nowhere does the word 70 ever refer to weeks. And so that was the gist of it. And so this woman, God bless her, she was nice. She had reached out to me and she said, "Hey, can you watch this video?" And I wrote back. I said, "No, this is not accurate. For and I gave her the reasons. But but her response to me then was, "Well, but I looked it up on ChatGPT, and it says that this is exactly what it says." And I said, "Listen, I read Hebrew. I can tell you this is what it is not saying. So I don't care what ChatGPT says. It's wrong." And then I gave her a couple verses to show how, at least in the video was making a claim, and because she didn't know how to read Hebrew, which is, again, not everybody does, but she was looking at, she asked ChatGPT, is it the same Hebrew words? And in reality, what you see there is it made a mistake. It didn't understand, again, the nuances of what we know about the consonantal text. For example, the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's a consonantal text without any vowel pointing. We know that the vowel pointing didn't come until the Masoretes later. And so if you were to look at like the Leningrad Codex or the Aleppo Codex, these are codexes, from 900 AD to 1000 AD. They're all pointed. So it's very clear that the pointing helps you see, even though the consonants are the same, that there's a different nuance of the word there. And so what the person did in the video was they just showed the consonants. And so when you have the consonants are identical, but it's clear that the pointing on the bottom is different. So, but all that to say, she went to ChatGPT, and she was convinced that the video was correct, that I was incorrect based on the ChatGPT AI.
That's really sad, because basically now you have GPT using probably just modern Hebrew, which is written unpointed.
Yep.
And running with that, and probably having a very superficial translation ability of modern Hebrew, because some of these languages are not even at 50% accuracy yet. Some, like Spanish and French and languages that are that common, they're pushing 90% accurate. They still have to be corrected and edited. But what's interesting is you pointed out in Daniel chapter 10, verses 2 and 3, the exact same word is translated weeks. So there we read, in those days, I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. Daniel 10:3, I ate no pleasant food, no meat or wine came into my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. And this has been the understanding of this word in the Hebrew, whether the translators are reading it pointed or unpointed, from the time of Christ. So the Septuagint gives us 77s. The Latin Vulgate gives us 77s. So even back in the days when they were working off of the unpointed Hebrew manuscripts, they still got it right. They knew what it said.
Yeah, to me, it was a little bit disingenuous in the video. And of course, the video started out with showing a nice graphic of just the consonantal text. And then by the end, it's causing doubt on all the English translations. And then by the end, it was predicting the rapture in October of 2025. So you're like, okay, here we go. We're a date setting thing. But the fact of the matter is, I think most people, we understand the word. Well, okay, look, I'll say it this way. In Hebrew, you have the word shavua, which is different than the word sheva. Sheva is the word for 7, and shavua is the word for week. So we understand, for example, the feast of Shavuot. Shavuot is the feast of weeks. The ot on there is a feminine ending. It makes it plural weeks. Well, there in Daniel 9:24, it says Shavuim. So it's the same Shavua, but it has the masculine ending on it, which would agree with this next word, which is Shavim, which means 70. So this isn't anything crazy, because this word itself, again, the video was saying nowhere, not a single time in the entire Bible is Shavuim translated as weeks. And I just said, well, Daniel chapter 10, verses 2 and 3, the exact same word is there. And as you know, Lee, when you're doing interpretation, you always, when you're using like a specific Hebrew word, the first layer, the first circle is always with the author in his own book.
Yeah.
Because he might use the word in a very unique way. And of course, Daniel's writing in 600 BC, which is different than how it's written by Moses, 900 years earlier. And so, as we know, language changes. If you read Middle English today, most of us wouldn't even understand. And that was only 500 years ago, right? So I said, look, if you go to look at Daniel, he used it in the next few verses. It was like 3 verses later. I said, but secondly, this word does appear. So the video is incorrect. They are saying something that is wrong. And I said, I know you went to ChatGPT, but there's some nuances there that even ChatGPT got wrong. So one of the reasons we were discussing this is to encourage people, hey, listen. And I have more examples of catching ChatGPT in incorrect things. And you can tell it, like if people look at this, I've switched over to Grok. I use Grok now, but ChatGPT, I'd be like, hey, you said earlier this. Why are you saying this now? And it would say, oh, Mondo, that's a great catch. Good job. You know what? You are precision oriented. ChatGPT is like my best friend. That's the way it's designed. But you can catch it in errors right there in your conversations, and you can call it out, and it says, oh, well, you're right. Yeah. Well, the reason I messed up was because A, B, and C. So people just need to be careful.
Yeah, absolutely. AI works great if you know how to use it for artwork. AI works great for organizing data or for interpreting a database, or at least giving you the right directions or concepts for interpreting a database. It works great with mathematical equations if it's been trained in that class of equations. But and it works pretty good if it's been well instructed on translating modern languages. Mm-hmm. But on modern languages that it's not well instructed, it does terrible. And it does beyond terrible on ancient languages.